Hi, and welcome to Voices from the Left. I'm your host, Craig. Thanks for listening. Here's a quote to set the tone for our discussion tonight. Quote, mob guys had muscle, and where in hell do you think employers got the tough guys when they wanted to break a strike? Unquote. Jimmy Hoffa. You can see the citation for that quote in the show notes. All right, so let's get started. Today I'll be speaking with my friend Scott Varese. Years ago, we worked in maintenance together for a skilled nursing facility. We were represented by the Service Employees International Union, or SEIU. Today, we'll just be discussing, our trials and tribulations of being worksite leaders, bargaining team members, grievance handlers, and arbitration committee members. Scott, how you doing, man? It's great to talk to you.
Doing good, Craig. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, you bet. So I've got a little bit of story time here before we get rolling. So November 2011 is when I was hired by the skilled maintenance facility. So I joined the maintenance team. First day, I met Scott and I met Wild Bill. Wild Bill was an old farmer. He was blind in one eye, but could fix anything. He was an unassuming guy, nice as hell, and just overall dealt a bad hand. When he wasn't regaling us with stories of doing donuts in the bishop's lawn, he tried to convince us that mermaids were real and had all kinds of crazy stories about mermaids and things from some show he watched on, the History Channel. Was clearly not true. he was quite the character, though.
He was awesome.
Sadly, he has passed. And I know that we could talk for quite a while about Bill. But Scott, is there anything else you want to add about, before we move on?
No, not really. That's pretty good, accurate description of Bill, though, I'll tell you. I remember one time we were down in, I guess I do. One time we were down into the resale shop.
Okay.
And, I was standing with this guy, this old guy, one eye, just not what you'd ever expect. And we're standing in front of a whole bunch of jewelry, just that somebody had just dropped off and we're sending in. And I reached down, and I thought I'd kind of blow his mind a little bit. I threw in an earring, and I look up, and he's got a dangler on. That guy had a pierced ear. I never would have thought it.
Hilarious.
To know that, you never would have seen,
Yeah.
He was one of a kind, I'll tell you.
He truly was one of a kind. It was a trip talking to him and working with him. It was
something else.
Amazing. Yeah. All right. So Scott, why don't you tell us, I guess, for the listeners, what your time at the skilled nursing facility was like before I was hired? Like, when did you start? Who were the worksite leaders? And then basically anything else you want to say about your time before I got there.
Okay, that's interesting because when I got there, it was a great place to work. We had a guy, we'll call him John, and he was our CEO. And he was really, really great for all the employees. He had believed in workers' rights, treated us really well, like pizzas on Fridays. I mean, we're talking, I got there, I came out of the ski industry, and then it was like we were just spoiled children as far, from where I had been.
Sure.
It was just like this unbelievable thing. There was a worksite leader, the only one that I really knew. There were two of them, but I only really got to know the one, Ben. And he didn't push anything. He was like, join the union, sign your card, whatever. And I just did because my father, came, a Sicilian immigrant, his dad, and they were railroad union. So, I mean, I knew union was a good thing. But, I came from a non-union job, but didn't see a reason for him. I guess it was just one of those things. When John was let go, for whatever reason, I guess he was doing too good of a job. And I could go on for hours about John, how great he was. It was, everything changed. And all of a sudden, they started talking about decertifying the union. And I wasn't very active in it. And Ben had moved on to the east side. I don't know whatever happened to the woman. I guess she had gotten let go somehow or moved on, with her life. And there was really nobody here. If we had any problems, we were having to go out to the east side the other camp to get anything out of the union. They started talking about decertification, and Wild Bill and I were sitting at lunch one day, and we were talking about the decert, and he goes, they want to decert it really bad for a reason. He said, I don't know. I don't really care because it's, I'm almost retired. But seriously, it's, I do know that you don't ever want to let go of something that you have. You don't want to just give it away.
Right.
And I was like, God, you're right. So we started doing a little things like talking to people. Bill would talk to people because everybody loved him.
Yeah.
And
Bill's
he would
great.
talk, on behalf of the union. And I would go around and start putting it making up pamphlets and flyers and little cards and things and leaving them in break room, supporting the union and trying to get more people involved. And things were going pretty bad. I mean, I'd put them in and they'd be tearing them, they'd be throwing everything away. And I'd be putting them right back in. I was going in on my days off. It was just no fun. Then you showed up. That's about the time you showed up.
Yeah.
And I mean, it looked really bad. We were ready for a vote shortly after you got there, weren't we?
I don't recall that, but I do have a question about, you mentioned that they were trying to do a decert effort. Was that something that like they brought up, like that the management brought up in the labor management meetings that they were trying to do it? Or how did you hear about it?
I wasn't even in on the labor management meetings at that point, I don't think. That was, I guess it was, the obvious answer is, yeah, it was management because, why would most people?
Yeah.
And then some of their shills. I mean, you had to look at the guy who at the time was in the computers. Yeah, I don't want to say his name here.
The IT guy?
Yeah, IT guy.
The kid, yeah. I know who you're talking about.
I mean, these guys were running around saying all sorts of stuff. Like, why are you paying, you got to pay dues? Yeah, we don't have to pay dues. We don't have to pay. What? We have to, I wouldn't pay to go to work type of crap is what people were saying. And it was just really bad. It was just really bad. How do you not understand that that's not what we're talking about here? You're not paying to go to work.
Right. Yeah,
it was frustrating. It was a very frustrating time because we were not working with the brightest bulbs anyway.
Yeah.
They didn't pay enough to really get the best and brightest.
I gotcha. Interesting. So
there was a large population of staff that didn't speak English.
Sure.
That was another thing. There was that language barrier for us.
Right. That just compounds the organizing efforts.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, so I'll talk a little bit about like when I started. So I gave a little brief intro earlier about it, but I had been in a union before, but it was the IBEW. So it was a little different setup than what we had at the skilled nursing facility. Right. So, it was good. I didn't have any complaints. But I really didn't have I had no like activism while I was in there. It was during the housing market, when the housing market crashed the first time in 2007. And like, there just wasn't any work. So I didn't even get a chance to, participate in any of like the organizing efforts at the time. So I just kind of was paying dues and working, and, housing market just went to shit and never came back. And I had to get a different job. So I started with you and at the skilled nursing facility. And like, I didn't have any issues with unions. I signed my card. We were fortunate that we were making enough, my wife and I together, that it didn't matter. That just little bit of money that was coming off for dues, right? It was like totally worth it because I understood then that what it meant, right? But that first handful of months, November to like March of working there, you and I talked a lot, obviously. And like I saw, stuff that was happening, and like, you introduced me to our union rep at the time, and like we had some discussions, but like, there was just like a leadership vacuum, really, right? Like you were doing what you could, but they really like, it just needed someone that to come in and like take charge of it, right? And people will complain, union doesn't do this for us, and the union doesn't do that, and it's like, no, you misunderstand what a union is. A union is the people.
Right.
You have to participate, right? Paying your dues, if that's all you can do, that's fine. But then that's it. You have to vote in the elections. You have to, show up to labor management meetings if you get asked to. You got to help, show up at events, things like that. No one's perfect. You can't go to everything, right? But like, yeah, you need to participate and just understand that like a union is the people. That's what it is. It's not. Yes, it's an organization, but they can only do so much. It needs participation from the members. That's what makes a union, right? So it's like, like you said, there was one or two worksite leaders maybe when we got there, and or when I got there, and it was just kind of one of those things for me that was just like, I've always sort of been a natural leader. I think you probably picked up on that right away. Or within the first few months anyway, you probably realized it. And then, I just basically was like, yeah, we need to do this, right? So that we don't have I had just come off of being laid off for like 4 years because the housing market crashed, because of bullshit capitalism, no regulations, just whatever the hell capitalist assholes want to do, they could do, right? So it's like, at least a union gives you some power to push back, right? It gives you some leverage, and in some cases it makes all the difference of having a job or not, right? So it's like, it was just a no-brainer for me. I didn't want to lose my house. I had a kid. It was like, this is what I have to do now. Like, I have the ability to do this, so I'm going to do it. And like, it was interesting to me to see like the reaction around the place. Like, I remember having a discussion with our first union rep from SEIU. His name was Andy. I know you know what I'm talking about. And so before I get into that though, there was a point in time where like basically management found out that I was I was gonna be a worksite leader, and like, that they were going to have someone picking up the mantle basically from whomever was doing it before that. Right. And, it became apparent very quickly that they really did not like that someone was trying to help. Like that there was going to be someone, especially a brand new guy who just got there, is going to come in and like take charge and like lead people. Like they hated it so much. And I remember like having a discussion with one of the physical therapy staff. She brought a wheelchair over to the maintenance shop and wanted us to fix it. And like, she drops it off and she's just like, hey, X, Y, and Z needs to be fixed. And I was like, okay. So I take it inside and I start working on it or whatever. And then I get to a point where I just can't do anything else about it. And I went back to her and I said, look, we're as far as we can go with this. We can't work on this anymore. And so I said that to her. She said that to someone else in the physical therapy department, who one of them was a total management shill, just a complete douche. And like,
it was unbelievable.
Yeah. And like,
oh God,
she told HR, and all of a sudden you and me and our boss are in a meeting, and he like calls an impromptu meeting with you and me and him in like one of the storage rooms. He's like, hey, what's going on with this thing? They're like saying this. I'm like, I never refused to work on anything. Like, no, I'm not trying to do a work stoppage. Like, they're accusing me of all kinds of crazy shit. And I was just like, no, fuck you. And they like wanted to talk to me about it. And I was like, there's nothing to talk about. They're like, well, what did you say to her? It's none of your fucking business what I said to her.
Yeah.
But if you must know, I told her that it's fixed as it can be. There's nothing else we can do for you. And you guys intentionally took that as, well, I'm trying to start a work stoppage.
That's
and
right.
Like, do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Like,
that wheelchair was Mortimer brought it across the Great Plains.
Yeah,
Right?
yes.
Found the
Yes.
beautiful facility.
Totally. Oh God,
It was just
that
junk.
was, oh yeah, it was rough. So I remember talking to Andy about that, about just like, look, hey, this thing happened. They're totally lying. They're just fabricating this to try and get me in trouble. And he's like, you gotta, he goes, you've got a target on your back now, and it's going to be there, and they're going to get worse. They're going to keep doing these things until they realize that it's not going to work to try and intimidate you. So you just have to push through it. And I was like, all right, that's fine. I can handle that. So I did. I was just like, yeah, all right. I didn't change a thing. I just kept doing the same thing, just talking to people. When, I remember when we started up the labor management meetings again, like I sent them this big long email to who was, it was a different HR person than when I stopped working there, but she wasn't the HR person for very long. I remember after I started, but anyway, I emailed her and I was just like, we're going to talk about this, this, and this. And one of the things I included in there was, we want to make sure that your supervisors understand what their obligations are when they have union employees. So that was like on a Monday. I sent that. I come into work the next day, and I was only there for like a half a day because my grandpa died the night before. So like I had like 3 days off, and the labor management meeting was like 2 days later on a Thursday. So I remember, I was just off of work. I come in on Monday and I'm like, hey man, how'd the labor management meeting go? Because you ended up having to go by yourself. And you said you just got yelled at specifically because I asked them if their managers were trained properly. Do you remember that?
They literally took that as you were trying to run the facility. They took that they were butthurt. I remember that. Oh my God.
It's such horseshit because they obviously had no idea how to have unionized employees. None of them did. None of the management did. They just were so afraid. They didn't even want to talk to anybody. I remember having a conversation with one of the nurses who the LPNs and RNs were not in the bargaining unit, if you'll remember. Yep. So like they made them supervisors so they couldn't be in the bargaining unit.
Yep, I remember that.
So like I remember one of the
wanted to be in the union.
They wanted to be big time. Oh, yeah. They could have started their own, of course, but they were scared shitless because they were lied to and intimidated about getting fired for trying to start a union. More fucking unfair labor practices. But I remember some CNA got written up, and I just went to talk to the supervisor about it. And she's like, so what, that you're like filing a grievance? I go, no, this isn't a grievance meeting. I go, I'm just collecting facts. Like, I want to know what you have to say about what happened. And she's like, oh, you didn't file a grievance? I'm like, no. I'm like, do they not tell you anything? And she's like, no, I have no idea. Like, I got your email, and I knew this person before. Like, I talked to him all the time because I was in that building, right?
Yeah.
Like, that building was my responsibility, and you and Bill, of course, helped me a lot. But like, I was in there, especially by that time, I was in there by myself pretty much all the time, talking to the nurses, fixing stuff for them. Like, they're bitching about the heat not working or the cooling not working, whatever it was.
Cooling. Oh my God.
And like, I liked this person I was talking to. They were like a decent person. And I remember sitting down with her, and I was like, so let me guess. You were told you had to write this person up by HR. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, I suspected as much. Yeah. And she was just like, yeah. And I was just like, well, I'm just here to collect some facts. I need to get your story. I got to get the story of the person you wrote up, and then we'll see what happens. And she was like, okay. Like, she was super nice about it, but they had no training. They didn't help them at all. And I remember at the time being super naive about it, being like, why, what the fuck? These people are so incompetent. They can't train their managers about this. I have come, many years later, I have come to learn that it's not an incompetence thing. I mean, it sort of is, but it's not because they don't want to. It's not like they're sitting there going, we don't need to train people. They can figure it out. They're just intentionally ignoring it because they hope it goes away. Right.
And, it's just that's what they're used to.
Yeah, it's just part of the grift from management people in general, but especially that one. They were just like, we'll just it'll just blow over, and then it'll go back to us just being assholes, firing people for dumb shit, and 2 people got caught stealing and you fire one of them and not the other one because one of them was black and one of them was white. And it's just like, you guys, this is just like blatant discrimination shit. Like, you can't do that.
Great. That was your building that was happening.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah, all the time. And then they pissed and moaned about why they couldn't fucking hire people.
Yeah. No, it was so bad. I remember very beginning when we started, it was almost like, okay, let's have grievance night because there's so many we had in the beginning. And they were just so lazy or just hoping it would go away, as you would say.
Yeah.
And we would win because they just wouldn't respond. They lost so many just because, remember that? And then they came out for blood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They were pissed for a while.
Oh, they were so mad what they went. We can lose? Wait a minute. We can lose?
Yeah, you can. Especially if you've met your intellectual superior. Like, you're gonna lose.
Holy cow, they certainly had.
So I think this just reminded me too. I think we should explain what labor management meetings are, and then we'll move on to, because you have a good segue into grievances, but I don't want to lose the labor management thing just in case someone who listens doesn't know what they are. So if our contract when we were working there said that we had to have that we could have weekly labor management meetings, and that meant that the worksite leaders, who were the union members plus the union representative from SEIU, once a week would come into a meeting at the facility with management people, whether it's HR folks, managers, if they need to call someone in there to talk about an issue, might have a nursing staff in there, a training person, whoever it might be. Right. So basically it was a contractual thing where we try and hammer out issues that are not necessarily acute issues, because that's what grievances are for, but these were chronic things that we noticed that we wanted to get ahead of and try and help resolve so that everything could run smoother on both sides. Right. So that's what labor management meetings were for. Yes. And the fact that Scott got yelled at in the first one that I set up and couldn't attend, I still feel bad about that, but it's like, I don't know, what do you want me to do? Like, he's an adult, he can handle it. But all right, so grievances, let's chat about those. So I brought one up earlier, you mentioned it too, but a grievance is just a formal piece of paper that a worksite leader or union representative fills out and files with the management of a facility, saying that someone from outside of the bargaining unit violated the contract in some way, whether didn't matter what it was for. If they violated the contract in any way, you could file a grievance. Yeah. And usually a lot of them were for attendance. This person will file a grievance for someone who got written up when they shouldn't have for attendance, or they didn't come in late, but they said they came in late. Oh, you didn't call in, you're fired. Or this is your, this is the first of your 2 no call, no shows for the entirety of your employment here. Like, when they clearly did call, because there's record of it, like on the phone
and I
system.
Don't know how to count.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Oh, they couldn't. No one could figure out the rolling calendar.
Yep.
The rolling attendance calendar was so hard. Oh, yeah, we could, because it's simple math, right? But they could not figure it out. Man, they hated it. They just could not do it. And it's one of those things. They just didn't pay attention. They were just like, we'll just write people up if we don't like them. And if we do like them, we won't write them up. And it's like, that's like classic.
It did.
That's classic behavior that you cannot do with union members. You have to treat everyone equally, right?
Correct.
So, so I think maybe when I started, maybe 20, 25 grievances, maybe 30 total had been filed in the history of SEIU being there. Maybe it was more like 50, but it was not very many.
Maybe
when I started. Next week. Well, I just remember after 2 years of working there, I remember looking, like, because we used to number them, right? So we'd know, and so that our union rep could file it and keep track of it, especially if it got to arbitration, so everybody knew which one you're talking about. I remember we were up almost to 200 after like 2 years.
Yeah.
Of like, that is just how rampant they're not all quote unquote unfair labor practices, because some of them are actual contract violations, but a lot of it was stuff that was an unfair labor practice too. That was just like clearly, you can't do some of these things like the decertification effort you brought up earlier. Like you can't fucking do that. And like,
I remember,
just all kinds of crazy stuff.
I remember you made him so mad. They wanted to change where the union office was.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Yes, I do.
We fought him like that on Grace. They were just little bitches.
Oh God, they hated it. They hated anyone having any say in what was going on around there other than them. It was just classic, just classic capitalist assholes, right?
Oh yeah.
And it was stupid because it was a either nonprofit or not for profit. I can't remember anymore. Which doesn't mean you're not a capitalist asshole, but it's like you're a skilled nursing facility. Your entire existence is to help people, right?
Right.
You're not a soul sucking corporation, right? In that regard, right? Where
not supposed to be.
Yeah, not supposed to be, right? For sure.
It was unbelievable.
All right, so we're back from a little break there. So yeah, we were talking about them wanting to move the union office, and we filed a grievance over, of course, because part of the reason is I just like giving them a hard time because they were such dicks.
True.
They were just assholes. And the other part was there was no reason to move it.
Yep. No.
Their reason for moving it was bullshit. They were moving it for union busting reasons. That was the only reason to move it. And so we fought it, and at this point I can't remember if we moved it or not. But we had established enough of a foothold, it wouldn't have really mattered if it moved. Right. I said, I fought it because their principles were bad, right? They were lying about why they wanted to move it, and it just simply didn't need to move.
Yeah. They needed out from where all the staff was. They wanted to put it over in that building where it was just mostly residents.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That was like, no.
Yeah.
Oh, hell no.
Well, I think, and part of the reason why was because, like, when I got there, there was 3 worksite leaders, really, you and Ben and someone else, probably Bruce.
Yeah.
Bruce
might have been there already. Okay.
Yeah, because Bruce was doing the orientations, if I remember correctly.
Good enough.
Yeah, he was doing orientation, getting people to sign their cards. But
it might be a little fuzzy. That was a long time ago.
Dude, it was. What is it? 2023? That was 12 years ago already, man. It's crazy. Yeah. But yeah, so like, between you and me and Bruce, we grew the ranks of the worksite leaders from 3 when I got there up to 9.
Yep.
Like
some of them are still there.
Yeah, some of them are still there. Yeah, I was I was number 4, and between you, me, and Bruce, we recruited another 5.
Yep.
But it was necessary, and it's just the way it had to be, including someone on the East Campus. I forget, because we were on the West Campus at first.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, they really did not like the amount of organizing that was happening, the amount of leadership that was pushing back on them because of their terrible management practices. And like I said before, like, it was naivety at first on my part. I've come to realize now some of it's not incompetence. It's just intentionally pretending like the union doesn't exist because they can. But there was a shitload of incompetent management there too. Like, they did all kinds of dumb things. Like, they could, like you said before, they couldn't count for grievance, for writing people up for attendance. Hilarious. But yeah, the grievance meetings, let's talk a little bit about those in particular. So, like, the grievances, you could have 3 steps to a grievance process, and then it could go to arbitration if it got voted to go to arbitration by the SEIU arbitration committee, which I was a part of at the end. We won't get too much into that, but the 3-step process was you file the grievance, and then you have a step 1 meeting. That's typically with the person's direct supervisor and the staff member that wanted, that had the wrongdoing done to them, and their direct supervisor, essentially, who wrote the actual corrective action or did the dumb thing that they shouldn't have did. Yeah. And then if, you have that meeting, if and then management has 7 days to respond once you have the meeting to tell you whether or not they're going to, give you what you're asking for in the grievance, whether it's rescinding a corrective action or, removing a point off of someone's, record for attendance, or, giving them a shift they were supposed to get, or, paying them for something they should have been paid for that they didn't, not having their break. There's just a litany of things, where people's rights get violated every day in non-union shops, that in union shops you have a recourse, or more of a recourse. You could do it in non-union shops too, but it's more intimidating and harder, and no one does because they'll just fire you, which they're not supposed to do in union shops. You're protected for that. Yeah, right to work for shit pay and shit working conditions. So like I said, you'd have that with usually their direct supervisor. And then if management didn't basically do what the union asked, then you'd take it to a step 2 if you felt like you could push it and actually get a win if you got farther up the food chain, or if it was like a significant enough thing to like that was going to set a precedent if we let it go, right? So like if they were writing people up at 2 over their attendance points for their first corrective action when they should have been firing them at 6, if they wouldn't learned how to do progressive discipline properly, like, you can't let that precedent get set, because then people can work there till they have like 14 absences, or worse, they just fire people right away. Like, it was just crazy shit like that. So like, then you'd have the second step would typically be with like a director level person, like the person above that supervisor. And then if you if you had to get to the third level, that'd generally be the VP of HR, or someone they designate if they had another HR person that was responsible for union issues, which at that place they did. It was typically, I won't say her name, but I made her cry at one point apparently but don't be an asshole, and I won't have to point out that you're being an asshole. But he's such a dick. Yeah, I am, because I need to be, because these people's rights are being violated all over the fucking place. And oh, by the way, the residents aren't getting the care they need because of it, because you guys are clowns. Like, come on. Yeah. So like, then if you didn't get the resolution that we wanted, then the person could ask to have it go to the arbitration committee with SEIU. And that committee was typically just a group of worksite leaders and a couple people from the union who would get together and meet about 2 or 3 grievances like once a month and decide like, yeah, we should take this to the arbitration, through the arbitration process. And that meant that they would file with the Wisconsin Employment Relations Committee, and then they would send in a third party to mediate getting the resolution of the grievance, basically. We didn't have a whole lot at our facility that went to that process, because they generally didn't want to spend the money, because it was both the union and the facility had to split the cost of arbitration and shit like that. So typically they got resolved after step 3, one way or the other.
It's expensive. Yeah.
And then if the arbitration committee said no, like, this one isn't going any farther, like, sorry, that's just how it goes. Right. Mm-hmm. But that was interesting. So, and the grievance process, like, I was, this, but I was very hard line with all of them, just all the time, always taking a hard line, just being like blunt, to the point. Don't give them ever any breathing room at all to like come up with some dumb shit to say, and like, while you're in an actual grievance meeting. Because they'd come in with all kinds of stupid shit they sat around for hours with their bosses thinking to say, right, to get themselves to win the grievance, quote unquote. And it's like, I, for whatever reason, I was pretty good at it. At being a grievance handler.
You were always polite. You always said, "Have a nice day."
I don't even remember that. I don't recall that. But
that's what you used to sign off with on every freaking one of them. Have a nice
day. That's hilarious. I don't remember that, but that sounds about right. That sounds like something I do.
I'll never forget it.
That sounds like something I would do. Have a nice day. Oh man, I love busting their chops because they could just get themselves in a tizzy. And like once I realized that they were that like they weren't gonna like they could try whatever they wanted, right, to get to
Yeah.
write me up and get me out of the organization. Like they had to they knew that if they were coming after me, they had to come hard, get all their ducks in a row, and they still couldn't do it because they tried that one time. But
Do you
so
remember and what do you remember of this? When the director and her assistant filed those charges on me for
oh
yeah, no, that was some serious stuff right there.
yeah, it wasn't sexual harassment, but it was the hell was it?
I can't remember. All I remember,
It was just regular harassment, basically, or like disrespect. You were being. They said you were being disrespectful or some bullshit. I don't remember.
Yeah, a little more than that. I can try to remember exactly what it was. You and Andy had to come down, and Andy was talking about bringing a lawyer up, and it was ugly.
It was, but it was horseshit. They had no leg to stand on, and they fucking knew it.
And it didn't here's how they knew it. At the end of it all, they were like, either he goes or we do. Do you remember that? They were out of there.
Whoever it was, right? Whoever said they quit. Yeah. I forgot about that.
That was the director, and then the other one followed her over to that other place.
Was that the director of dining services?
No, that was another one though. No, this was the director of nursing.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that?
I remember.
I was never going to be able to work again.
Yeah.
They were trying to actually file some charges.
They were, yeah, I remember. But it's all horseshit, of course.
Basically, I'm trying to say bully tactics, whatever they called it.
Whatever they could.
Bully tactics. It wasn't bully tactics. It was you're losing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, they had nothing. They had nothing. They were just grasping at fucking straws all the time, constantly.
There was a dining lady too.
Oh man. Yeah. Man, the grievances though, those I think were like the best, like that and being on the bargaining team were like the best parts of it for me. Like I just loved having those interactions and like, pointing out like, here's the dumb thing you did. Here's why here's what the contract language says. Here's what you did, which is obviously the opposite of what the contract language says. So just stop pretending. Okay. Yeah. And they never backed off. I mean, occasionally they would, but like they tried so hard to never let us be right. Never let the grievances go through, like, and give any kind of like redress to the person that had, whatever thing happened to him.
Yep.
That was crazy. Just crazy.
That was nuts.
All right. Back from another break. Crazy dog. The grievances, yeah. So we talked quite a bit about that. Nothing really specific, but we could pick apart each one if we remembered them all. And really all it really comes down to is like that is your redress. That is your course of action if if you think your rights and or the contract has been violated by the company that you work for, like that's your recourse, at least at that place. And I think most of them are that way. But like that's what you do. You file a grievance and you talk to your union representative if you don't have a worksite leader, and they'll do it, right? So it's a good thing. I had a great time doing it. I really did. And we ended, like I said, we got a bunch of people trained to do it, and like I ended up not having to handle the nursing ones anymore because we got another worksite leader that was a CNA. And like she had the grit, man. She had her fire burned hot like you want from a union rep. And she just got it, right? She understood it. I trained her and you trained her, and I didn't have to do the nursing ones anymore because I was out of my element as far as like, what the policies were for like how to be a CNA and stuff like that. I'd have to learn on the fly, like right before a grievance meeting what it was, whereas she already knew them. So she was better suited for those. And management loved the fact that I wasn't in there because they didn't like talking to me.
Right.
Let's wrap up part one here with one quick thing I want to say. So I remember it was me and our first union rep, Andy. He calls me and he's like, "Hey man, HR wants to talk to us." And I was like, "About what?" And he's like, it's they want to talk about you." And I was like, "Okay, what do they want to talk about?" He's like, "I don't know, they weren't very clear." And I was like, "Whatever, man. If they want to fucking pay me to go sit in a grievance meeting, that's their
Yep.
prerogative. I'll do it." So like I remember getting in there and it was the head of HR, and I think it was just the head of HR and me and Andy. And like she starts talking about how like they don't like my tone and stuff. And I'm like, have I ever been like unprofessional or disrespectful or anything like when we've been talking in person? And they're like, well, no, but it's like the emails. And I was like, you can't judge tone in an email. Like you're reading something that may not be there. Like, do you have, and I was very to the point and didn't beat around the bush and would just say, look, this is what happened. This is what you need to do to fix it. This is what the contract language says. So I know I'm right. So do it. And I, and they didn't like being talked to like that. But it's like,
Right.
I wasn't screwing around. We're not wasting time. Like, this is what you need to do. You know, I'm right. Do it. And so anyway, they were like, yeah, well, we just don't like your tone. I was like, do you have any examples? Can you provide anything for me and Andy to talk about so I can have some personal growth if you really think I'm being a problem? And they were just like, no. It was just, they just wanted to base, it was like a call for help.
Right.
It was a call for help basically for them. Once we had that meeting, I knew they were boned. When they did that, and I knew right away, as soon as we left that meeting, I remember saying something to Andy to the effect of, we got them, man. There isn't there's nothing. They got nothing left. They just don't. They are outmatched. They just don't know what to do. And it was just a very simple thing to me, just the way my brain works. It's like, what does the contract say? Okay, I interpret it this way. HR, how do you interpret it? Yeah, we interpret it that way too. Okay, then why did your supervisor do this other thing? That violates what that contract language says.
Yep.
They would never have an answer. It's because they wouldn't train them. They just let them do whatever the hell they wanted and hope the people wouldn't talk to us. And it's like, I remember one more point, and then we can break.
No problem.
Sorry,
this is all good memories,
dude. It was. I remember it got to the point like with the staffing issues where they were so short on CNAs and RNs and everything. Like I get to work at the normal time, 8:30 in the morning or whatever, 8 in the morning. We're in the shop for whatever, shooting the shit for 10 minutes or whatever, and then I was like, okay, fine. I bet I should go do some work orders and go see how they're doing on the floor upstairs. So I get one step out of the elevator that day, and there's 3 CNAs standing in front of me. Like they were waiting for me to come in. And because they started at like 6 or 6:30. So they were just like, I know, like they were just like waiting for me. Craig, I need to talk to you about this and this and this and this bullshit happened. And I was like, guys, I'm on the clock. We cannot do this. I can get in trouble. And so can you. Like I will help you, but we have to do this on break or after work. And I'm sorry if you think you can't wait, but it has to. Like I can't. I don't know what to tell you. Like I can't. And they were like, oh, okay. And they were really like deflated. And I'm like, I'm not blowing you off. This is how it works. I can't help you right now.
Right. Yeah, I remember not being able to get my coat off without people coming.
Yeah.
They'd be like, we got to get punched in.
Yeah. We're walking to the clock, man. We got to go work. We got to go fix wheelchairs and shit and fix outlets. Like we can't So after that happened, like I remember I called the meeting, just me and whoever the HR person was at the time, not even the head of HR, just like whoever she delegated to handle labor matters.
Yeah.
I just went down to her office after that. And I was just like, look, hey, I just had multiple people in a group come to me as soon as I stepped off the elevator this morning. And I told them the right thing, which was, we can't do this on the clock. You have to wait and I will talk to you later. But I remember going to talk to them and telling her that, like, look, you have a serious problem. I am not using hyperbole. I am not lying to you. Like, you have a serious problem with getting this facility staffed and getting people trained properly and making sure that the residents are getting what they need, because at the end of the day, that's what's at stake here. Someone's going to get hurt.
Oh yeah.
Right. And she just kind of looked at me, and she had this like defeated look on her face because she knew I was right. And there was nothing she could do because her hands were tied because of the management above her was just such fucking clowns. Like,
they're unbelievable.
They were just fucking terrible. It was just crazy. But, oh man. All right. Well, you got anything to say to wrap up part one?
I don't. Yeah, I do, but I don't know.
Yeah, I know. We could talk for 3 days. Yeah. So, all right, man. Well, we'll pick it up again for part two another time.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
Talking to you.
You bet. Bye.
That does it for the show. Don't forget to rate and review on whichever platform you use to listen. Special thanks to Nick Josephs for the use of the theme song. You can find Nick on Spotify and on the web at nickjosephs.com. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe on patreon.com/voicesfromtheleft or donate on buymeacoffee.com/voicesfromtheleft. All the links will be in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and solidarity.